Hi, everybody. Welcome to our lab session of the weekly lecture. I'll continue to try, at least for this this one and the next lab, to take you guys through it through video as well. Some of you had provided feedback that this helps. So, as far as I can find time during the week to build that in, I will work through the guided activities with you. So open up your RStudio Cloud and follow along. So this time, this lab, we build upon the framework that we learned in the previous unit for statistical inference and learn methods to compare means with each other when the central limit theorem does not apply, in particular because we have small sample sizes. So in addition to ggplot2 and the tidyverse, we're going to use two other packages that I want to call your attention to, the psych package. And the reason I'm using the psych package is that it has a function to run t-tests and to compute the confidence intervals all in one go in a very compact way. I think you guys are gonna like that. And I'm using the package car because it has a way to test for equal variances between groups, which is an important assumption to test when running independent samples t-test. All right, so let's get to work. So make sure you click here though to load the packages that I have installed and shared with you through the system. All right, so problem one we're gonna work with. Anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by weight loss or lack of appropriate weight gain in growing children, difficulties maintaining an appropriate body weight for height, age, and stature, and in many individuals, distorted body image. People with anorexia generally restrict the number of calories and the types of food they eat. Some people with this disorder also exercise compulsively, purge via vomiting and laxatives, and or binge eat. One consequence of anorexia is severe weight loss, which can lead to many complications, including death. The disorder affects females more frequently. A quick Google search suggests that the average weight of girls between 12 and 17 in 2002 was 130 pounds. One important question is how the weight of anorexic females compare to the weight of females in the population at large. How much of a difference is there? To answer this question, we will analyze data from a study conducted by Everett et al. In 1994, in which they investigated the role of family therapy on anorexia. We will look at baseline data for now, that is the weight of 17 females, 12 to 17 years old, before treatment. So just looking at before they got any interventions, what do their weight look like? What did their weight look like in comparison to the general population? Now, I know everybody is probably beginning to think about the exam that's coming up. In the exam, when you face a problem like this, you have to start thinking like a statistician. I want to know how the weight of anorexic patients in the population, their average weight in the population at large, compares to the weight of healthy people of the same age, right? So you have anorexic girls population and you have healthy girls population between 12 and 17 years old. And then I want to compare these two. All right. I do know the weight of the general population. There is a target value here, but I do not know the weight of girls with anorexia on this age range. So I have to take a random sample and estimate their weight by computing the mean of that random sample that I got, right? So I have one random sample and a target value to compare to. So start thinking about what kind of test can I use here? Is a z-test a candidate? Yep, if certain conditions are met. That's what we did last time, remember? we had the IQ of the population at large, and we had the IQ of mothers of gifted children that we had to estimate from one sample. In that case of last class, we used a z-test because we had independent observations. We had a large enough sample that allowed us to estimate with precision the variance of the sampling distribution. So we could apply the central limit theorem. We'll see what happens this time. But at this point, you have two candidate tests that you could do, the z-test or a t-test, and a special kind of t-test, which is, think about it, we had three options in class. If you're thinking one sample t-test, that's correct, because we have just one random sample, and we wanted to compare that to target value. But we don't know which yet. It will depend on some conditions. So let's load the data set. Data set is right here. I always like to open it up, take a look. Okay, we have two variables. We have treatment, and we only have before. So we have only the data before treatment, as I said. And we have the weight of the girls with anorexia. So just one random sample. There is a function called show that also allows you to kind of browse through the data set. It's kind of redundant. You could just just type anorexia. Another important thing is to look at the structure of the data set to see if R is identifying the variable correctly. We want weight to be numeric, and it is, so we're good. Treatment just have one level at this point, so it's not really a variable. It doesn't change values. It's just before treatment. So that's not important at this point. All right, so what kind of statistical test would be appropriate for answering this question? At this moment, we do have more information to decide between a z-test or one particular kind of t-test, which is the one sample t-test, right? Let's decide between these two. Do we have independence of observations? We do. It's a random sample. The size is definitely less than 10% of the population because we only have 17 observations. Number two, we need to look at the distribution. It needs to be not very skewed, and that we can't have too small a sample size because then we can't estimate the variance precisely. And remember, the magical number, which is on the low side, is 30, right? So we have 17 observations here. So the answer for us, I'll copy and paste just for the sake of quickness. The answer for us is that the test that we want, not the dependent activity, Paula Silva, the test that we want is a one sample t-test because we want to determine if the average weight of females with anorexia estimated from a small sample, meaning we can't determine with any accuracy the variance that is needed to compute the variation, the sampling error, right? The standard deviation of the sampling distribution. We don't have that, so we have a small sample. Differs from the weight in the population at large, which is a known parameter. So in these situations, we use a t-test, a one sample t-test, instead of a z-test. All right, so let's continue on. Now, t-tests also have assumptions, and I'm listing 3 of them, and we have to check this. That's the first step. Numerical data, check. Independence of observation, check. Random sampling, less than 10% of the population size. And weight should be normally distributed, or at least not show great deviations from normal. Because the sample size is small, the histograms not always look very nice, and they're not so useful to look at the distribution when the sample sizes are too small. So I will identify some other ways we can double check whether the distribution can be considered reasonably normal. So one thing, we still plot the histogram, so we need to ask for the range in the anorexia data to figure out what the boundaries of the bin should be. So if you go to console, you can actually type there. Oops. You can actually type range there and type the name of the data set, anorexia / weight, and get the range that way from 73.4 to 94.2. Or if you want to just do this here, you could insert R, so you have a little code piece, and you can do range anorexia, which is the name of the data set, $ weight. Now, the geom histogram, we have breaks, and the sequence is from 70 to 100 because we're going from a value below the lower end of the range of weights and all the way up to above that level. And I played around with various possibilities, and 5 seemed to be good enough, right? So I'm putting some names, title, all that you know about. We're also looking at the comparison between mean and median weight, which we've done last time as well. And I also found this cool function from the psych package that we are using today that gives us a bunch of indices, descriptors of the data, including mean, median, and others, and also values of kurtosis and skewness. And when skewness values are somewhere between -2 and 2, it's still reasonable enough to think of that distribution as normally distributed, as normal. And of course, the value of skewness that would be perfectly normal would be 0. It's never precisely 0. So values between -2 and 2 is one way of gauging that. So if we look at this is the distribution of weight. Pretty okay, right? Not too horrible. And then we have the median and the mean, which are pretty darn close together, which I will obtain that output with the second piece of code. And the third piece of code is the one that comes out of the function describe. And see, it takes as input the data set and the variable that you want to summarize. And here you have the number of participants in the sample, the mean, the standard deviation, the median, the trimmed mean. I think it takes out some percentage of values at the beginning and end. I think the min and max are taken out. We have other stuff, but I want you to look at skew, and you can see how there's pretty much no skewness in that distribution. And kurtosis looks at peakedness. If it's too peaked, that value will end up being more than -2 or 2, which is also not ideal. But we'll look at mostly skewness and the difference between mean and median to make our decision. And we'll decide that this is a pretty normally distributed data set that we can work with under the constraints of the t-test. When we come back, we'll start introducing the descriptive part of the statistical process that will answer our question. See you soon.